Sonny is a very well seasoned businessman in the payment industry. He has over 15 years in the payment industry. He used to be former VP for Jumio, and he now is the CCO, the Chief Commercial Officer of Bitpay, which is the biggest payment processor, Bitcoin payment processor in the world. So he's in charge of managing all sales and business development at the company. So thank you, Sonny, for taking the time to come and visit us and share your experience with us.
Great, thank you, Diego. First off, forgive me for my American accent. So my name is Sonny Singh. I am the Chief Commercial Officer for Bitpay. And the first thing I'd like to say is that I am not a PhD, a scientist, a programmer. So all the stuff these guys talked about earlier, I understood maybe a small part of that. What I am going to talk about is how regular merchants and businesses around the world are actually using Bitcoin and blockchain technology. So I'm going to speak in hopefully words we can all understand. And okay, let's try this one again now. So again, I'm not a PhD or scientist. I'm going to try to bring, my job is to bring Bitcoin and blockchain technology to the masses and, make a business case for businesses and enterprises around the world to use it. So Bitpay is the largest processor of Bitcoin in the world. Think of us like First Data. So we help merchants and businesses all over the world enable Bitcoin and blockchain technologies. So I always like to start off with this slide about kind of the landscape of the Bitcoin community. You can see the rapid growth of the VC investment in the Bitcoin space. And the most important number is it's going to 3x this year from last year. And so having been based in Silicon Valley for 15 years and seeing a lot of trends and companies get funding back from Google, Facebook, and all that, we're seeing the same kind of ecosystem being built. And this $900 million, what that means is, that means people from Google, Facebook, the smartest scientists and engineers and entrepreneurs in the world are leaving those great companies to join the Bitcoin ecosystem. That means more jobs are being created. Silicon Valley is, fast predominantly becoming a Bitcoin hub, as well as, cities like London. I think there's a great opportunity for Buenos Aires, Sao Paulo, other cities in Latin America to really become a Bitcoin Latin American hub to help get jobs out here, create that financial hub that the Bitcoin community needs for Latin America. And with this type of venture capital money that's become 3x in the last year, it's showing now to become evident now that this is actually happening throughout the world. Bitpay actually, we have raised $30 million last year. That was our Series A round. At that time, it was the largest ever Bitcoin fundraising round. We look at Bitcoin as truly a global digital currency. So our investors ranged from Index Ventures, which is the largest European VC firm, to Richard Branson, very well known obviously in Europe as well. To America, we raised money from Founders Fund, which is Peter Thiel, the founder of PayPal, as well as Jim Robinson, the former CEO of American Express. And in Asia, we raised money from Li Ka-sheng, who's the wealthiest person in Asia, as well as Jerry Yang, the former founder of Yahoo. And those are very important, our investors, because it helps give credibility in working with large corporations like Microsoft and large banking partnerships that we need to create all throughout the world. And since that time, we've been past many other Bitcoin companies that have raised much bigger rounds. So it shows how the industry, just in the last 12 months, has changed so much. So when I joined Bitpay 12 months ago, the industry was still kind of starting out, trying to find its footing, so to speak. And then we raised a big round, and then since that time, you've seen companies like Goldman Sachs invest in Bitcoin now, Cisco, Qualcomm, NTT Docomo, Rakuten, IDG out of China. So you're seeing strategic investment happening from all over the world now, where 12 months ago that wasn't even thought of. And the investors in Silicon Valley are all the top venture firms like Andreessen Horowitz, Founders Fund, Greylock Partners, Benchmark. These are all the same investors that help start companies like Facebook, Google, Cisco, and really the backbone of the internet. Perfect. So where are we at today now? 2 years ago, again, this chart, Bitcoin would not have been on that. So it's just showing now how much of a traction Bitcoin has gotten in just the last 2 years, actually. It's really come a long way. And I imagine next 2 years will be up much higher, actually. Everything seems to be happening in exponential terms in the Bitcoin community. So it's very exciting to see that growth and see what is happening. And I don't even know 12 months from now where this is going to end up, actually. This chart represents the payments that are happening, the transactions that are happening every day. So the earlier speakers talked about how this is a public ledger. Everything is documented on the blockchain. That's actually true. I recommend you guys going to www.blockchain.info. It's a really cool website. I don't really understand a lot of it, but you see transactions happening in real time. So you actually see all the transactions being recorded with some weird code or whatever is around it, but you can see it happening. It's really interesting to look at. It goes back to the theory that Bitcoin is not anonymous. So if you are trying to do something illegal with Bitcoin, it's not a smart thing to do, actually. Everything is recorded in a public ledger for the rest of the world to see. So how are merchants and customers and global brands around the world actually using Bitcoin? And what can they use it for? We have a quote here from the former founder of PayPal, former CEO of PayPal, big advocate of Bitcoin. People thought PayPal might be competitive with Bitcoin. They're all open arms with embracing this type of stuff, actually. My favorite quote is from Dell. So Dell has been accepting Bitcoin now for the last year almost. After 1 year, they gave this tweet: there's no reason for a merchant not to accept Bitcoin anymore. So 12 months ago, people like myself were at conferences speaking to merchants out there, explaining why they need to accept Bitcoin. 12 months later, merchants like Dell, Overstock, Microsoft are actually speaking to merchants now, explaining the value of why they got accepting Bitcoin, the value they're getting out of this, and why the other merchants in the crowd should be accepting Bitcoin too. So we've really seen this ecosystem change quite dramatically. So this noisy slide of all the different merchants is actually noisy on purpose, because to show all the different types of brands that are accepting Bitcoin. There's over 100,000 merchants accepting Bitcoin globally right now, ranging from nonprofits like Greenpeace to the Fortune 100 companies like Microsoft and Dell to small little restaurants around the world. Anyone who accepts credit cards, who wants to attract new customers, Bitcoin is a perfect use case and payment option for them. Companies like Bitpay, we make it very seamless for a merchant to accept Bitcoin. Our job when we go talk to the payment teams at Microsoft or Zynga or Newegg or whatever, they're not quite familiar with how Bitcoin works. They're just like everyone else in the crowd. They're unsure how this really works. And Bitpay makes it very easy for them to set up. So why would a merchant want to accept Bitcoin? This is actually, first is lower cost. So when you accept Bitcoin, when you accept credit cards, as you know, the merchant pays anywhere from a 2 to 4% credit card transaction fee. With Bitcoin, we've pretty much eliminated transaction fees. We've lowered this down to 1%. So for every transaction now that happens on the Bitcoin ecosystem, let's say with a merchant, they just pay a 1% fee. So they're already saving 2 to 3% for each transaction. The great thing about that, Dell actually did a $50,000 computer order a couple months ago. So with Bitcoin, a $50,000 order, that's a very small payments fee versus what it would have been like with a credit card. So next part, lower risk. So when Dell shipped that $50,000 order, it's a very high risk ticket item. The odds of chargebacks are very high with that. With Bitcoin, there are no chargebacks. So I actually mean that 100%. There are no chargebacks. The merchant can do refunds if they want, but it's up to the merchant. So when someone pays with a Bitcoin transaction, it's essentially like paying with cash. They now have the option, they now can ship out that goods and not have to worry about the consumer saying he wants his money back and getting money back from Chase or Visa, or how that works in the payment card network, actually. The liability has shifted from the merchant to the consumer, actually. So Dell has no problem shipping that $50,000 order and having to worry about chargebacks or fraud. The next reason why you might want to accept Bitcoin is to sell globally. Overstock.com said it best when they went live accepting Bitcoin. They essentially went live and opened themselves up to 5 billion shoppers around the world. There's many shoppers around the world that might not have credit cards. How do they shop at Overstock.com now? Well, using Bitcoin now, they can accept payments from anywhere in the world. And since there's no chargeback risk, they have no problem shipping goods anywhere in the world because they've already got paid. So really great use cases for the merchants. And then also consumer privacy and consumer data. So this is a great reason why consumers like Bitcoin, but the merchants also like it because they don't hold any consumer private data. They don't hold their credit card number. There's no PCI issues actually. So every day you always read about in the news, companies being hacked for their credit card information and all that. Well, the merchants aren't holding any consumer privacy data for around credit cards for Bitcoin transactions. So also for the consumers, you know, I've got my credit card and, you know, all different internet sites now in America. I've lost track of it now. My debit card's out there, my credit card's out there now. I now keep my Bitcoin wallet for online digital purchases now. So anytime I'm online now, I don't like to use my credit card. I just like to pay in Bitcoin actually because I don't have to worry about my credit card number being left out somewhere and all that. And we're starting to see that trend more often now over and over again. But what is the really main reason why merchants really like Bitcoin? Well, they want to acquire new customers. They want to increase new revenue. And with Bitcoin, we're seeing this quite often. And the great thing about acquiring new Bitcoin customers, these are your merchant's favorite type of customers. They actually spend more, they come back more often, and they refund less. I'm hearing this over and over again from all my merchants actually. So one of our customers, Takeaway.com, their average order ticket item is 2x with Bitcoin than with US dollars. And this is a food delivery service. Another customer, Destina.com, this is a travel site. Again, higher ticket items with Bitcoin versus travel, versus credit card. And again, Destina is travel, so it's high risk too with chargebacks. So not only are they saving more money on the transaction fees, they're getting higher ticket items. One of our merchants is a billion-dollar retailer, and they went live a year ago, and here's kind of some of the value they thought. So first, the day of the launch, they get a lot of marketing value. The Bitcoin community talks about this merchant being alive. It's, you know, great exposure to the merchant. They got over 60% site increase in traffic that day alone. Obviously, the tweets mentioned all that. It got them great exposure they did not expect. They didn't think this would be a big deal to accept Bitcoin, but it got all new users coming to their site. And then based off that, in the first 180 days, these are the stats they got. So they had over 5,000 orders. But more importantly then, 42% were from new customers. So think about that. It cost the merchant nothing to set up to accept Bitcoin. There's no upfront fees. It cost them an engineer 1 or 2 days of work essentially to set it up. And for that amount of time, they just acquired 42% new customers. And these customers were spending 29% higher than credit cards. And of that, 69% came back and shopped again or had spent over $1,000. So after they start working with us for 6 months, they come back to us and say, how can we get more Bitcoin customers? This is great, actually. We want to get more Bitcoin customers. These are our favorite customers. And they actually gave a quote. They said accepting Bitcoin is similar to like accepting American Express. It kind of caters to a higher end person, but without that credit card fee associated with that and all the hassle involved with that too. So you're seeing, again, from the merchant side of you, there's absolutely no risk. And so when a merchant, let's say when a consumer goes to one of these sites to buy, let's say it goes to Dell to buy a computer equipment for, let's say, $300 US, and what happens is when they go to purchase it, it says, do you want to purchase a Visa, MasterCard, or Bitcoin? And they click on Bitcoin, it says, okay, $300 US equals, let's say, 1 Bitcoin, and they hit send. Bitpay takes that 1 Bitcoin, and then we settle with Dell, 300 USD the next morning, actually, similar to a credit card payment. So all these merchants, or most of these merchants, don't ever take possession of Bitcoin, don't get involved with the Bitcoin price fluctuation. Their accountants have no problem with it. It's just another checkout option to them, similar to Visa or MasterCard. We also have some merchants that accept their payments in Bitcoin and keep it, and that's up to them. But a lot of the global brands can't get involved in currency fluctuations. It's too hard in their accounting books, so they just have us handle everything. So again, Processors like Bitpay have made this very seamless and easy for merchants to accept Bitcoin with no risk at all. I mean, every time I call up a new merchant to want to accept Bitcoin, I hear the same thing. No, we would never accept Bitcoin. We don't know what it is, would not work for us. I say, great, what if I told you never take possession of Bitcoin, you're going to increase new customer revenue 1 to 2%, and there's no chargebacks? They say, oh, I didn't realize that. And now they're interested. And that's how you get the merchant adoption to go very fast. The other great thing that's happening now in the last 6 months, I would say, is the payment processors have now started to adopt Bitcoin. It's great that we go out and sign up to Dells, Expedias, the Overstocks, the Newegg's, the Tiger Directs, and Zyngas directly, but they all work with payment processors, and they'd rather have it all installed through the payment processor. So now you're starting to see payment processors integrate with companies like us to offer a Bitcoin solution. So a couple key companies I want to talk about are ones that are really growing rapidly, like Adyen or Stripe or Braintree. So Adyen is the back-end provider, and they got a large office here in Sao Paulo for Facebook, Groupon, Spotify, Dropbox, Airbnb. They just announced they do Uber's payments globally. And so this gives an option for all those companies now to accept Bitcoin through Adyen without having to deal directly with Bitpay. Braintree and Stripe, same kind of companies too, working very great with e-commerce companies around the world, have offered the same type of payment option too for their customers. And you're starting to see a lot of these other ones in Latin America now starting to take off. And that's really where adoption will grow much more exponentially than having directly talked to merchants ourselves. So that's kind of how the merchants are using it now. And then we're also starting to see a big shift in the amount of people now entering the Bitcoin ecosystem. So one of the speakers talked about it earlier, the type of names that are attracted to this industry, and I've never seen anything like this actually. So from Bitpay, we had Arthur Levitt, the former chairman of the SEC, come join our board of advisors. Arthur is very active. He attends all our board meetings, helps us out with rules and regulations, and it's just really amazing to see these type of people now entering this space. Lawrence Summers, former Treasury of the USA, joined. D. Hock was the actual founder of Visa. He joined another Bitcoin company. So a lot of financial executives that are the leading minds globally in finance are now teaming up with Bitcoin partners because they want to be a part of this space. They see it truly is cutting edge. People might think Visa or Citibank might find this competitive, but they don't at all. They've embraced this again. They want to work with these type of companies, this type of technology. Bill Bradley, a former senator, it's just been amazing. John Reed's the former CEO of Citibank. These guys have all come to embrace this community. It's really something like I've not seen before, actually. So we talked a lot earlier this morning about blockchain and the theoretical use and all that type of stuff. Well, what we're seeing now is banks are actually trying to learn how to work with the blockchain. So I'm going to talk about some of the financial companies we see and what they're up to. A lot of them are still secret and stealth about what they're doing, but they have announced publicly that they are working with this type of stuff. Bitpay is working with many banks, but we can't disclose what we're actually trying to do with them. First up is Nasdaq. So Nasdaq has been a big proponent of using the blockchain technology. And so they believe for their private marketplace, Nasdaq has a private marketplace in the States, they're actually going to use the blockchain to kind of secure and register all the transactions of shares in the blockchain. The great thing about this use case, though, is it's actually going to go live in Q4. So most of these companies are talking about the blockchain are talking about in pilots or in kind of their labs and stuff like that. Nasdaq has said on the record they will be live in Q4, which is a couple months from now. So this will be hopefully the first public use of a blockchain by the financial institutions to see how this works, to kind of audit and track share transfer and things like that. Overstock.com, who's been, their CEO has been a huge fan of Bitcoin for many years. He's actually launched a whole different crypto bond thing he's working on. He's got his own exchange he's doing. He's got a lot of different use cases he's working on. But more importantly, though, is he sees that he can settle this with Bitcoin and blockchain in rather than T+3 immediately. And banks see this also. This can be huge in settlement costs and settlement times where it takes 3 days to track the shares and all that type of stuff. This can all be done now instantaneously. Other banks that we see, it's across the board now. Everyone now has launched a blockchain pilot or initiative. We're seeing it all throughout the world, not just in America, but in Europe, South America, global banks everywhere. BNP Paribas, they had an analyst write a whole report on the blockchain. You know, they're trying to add it to one of the currency funds. Again, these banks don't actually specifically say what they're going to use it for. They just say that, hey, we're now working with this and investigating it. Citi's gone quite far. They've actually built 3 blockchains on their own and starting to play with that, as well as working with Citi Coins. They kind of launched their internal coin system called Citi Coins. UBS has built a whole blockchain lab in London. So we're seeing this quite often now, where people are, you know, announcing to the media, we're building a blockchain lab and we're working with some, and they're hiring scientists now. So a lot of companies, you see job descriptions now for looking to hire blockchain experts to help build this out for them. Barclays, just last month, boom, another project they're announcing, pilots. Again, they don't say what they're doing with it, so I can't talk in detail, and we've got NDAs with a lot of these banks, so we can't talk about it either. But they're all trying new things. And again, it'll be interesting to see how long it takes before Barclays and UBS actually roll it out in production, though. It's one thing to have it in pilots in their labs and all that, but I'm curious, you know, how long does it take for them to roll out in production? You know, banks and IT traditionally don't move that fast because they're, you know, they want to make sure everything's done properly. So it'll be interesting to see when they actually go live. That's why Nasdaq going live in Q4 this year is going to be very exciting to see how that actually works out. Central banks, you also see now starting to get involved, and also the consulting firms too, like IBM. So IBM now is creating a whole blockchain practice around this, starting to work with the banks themselves, and you're starting to see really everyone really looking at this, and let's see where it comes out, you know. Right now, you know, we work with them, but we also work with them on the merchant payment acceptance side. And then we also have a third use case that no one's really touched upon too much, but we work on payment distributions with Bitcoin. So we accept Bitcoin from merchants, but then we can also distribute Bitcoin on behalf of merchants or things like that. So what that really means is, at Bitpay, we work with our payroll vendor to allow the payroll vendor and several others to pay employees in Bitcoin. So at Bitpay, we have over 80 employees, and every one of the employees takes part of their paycheck, some do all of their paycheck, in Bitcoin. So we've offered that system now. We've got other companies now, payroll providers, offering the same thing to other employees that they work with. So it's an easy way for people to get Bitcoin. It gets deposited right into your Bitcoin wallet. You don't have to go to a website and buy it. Every 2 weeks when your paycheck comes, a portion of that goes into Bitcoin. Other great use cases are, let's suppose you have a multinational company that has contractors or consultants all over the world, in Asia, and they're paying out in the USA. How do you pay them quickly and easily? We work with these large companies. They give us a list of their employees' wallets, Bitcoin wallets. We hit send every Friday at 3 p.m., let's say, and they all get paid out instantaneously all over the world at no fees, essentially. Right now, they have the Western Union checks back and forth, and that gets very expensive, obviously. Other use cases can be developers and payouts. So you've got these big developer networks all over the world. You know, people are doing web freelancers and web development, things like that. How do you pay a web developer in Bangladesh that doesn't have a bank account per se? You can pay him in Bitcoin now. So it's a great use case. It happens very quickly and instantaneously. The last slide I always like to talk about is our compliance team. Compliance is very important in Bitcoin, but not just Bitcoin and payments in general. Having been involved in one payments company before that was not Bitcoin related, it's the same compliance infrastructure you need. And that's really why it's hard for startups to get involved in payments, is because they have to build out a whole compliance program around this, actually. Our chief compliance officer was a former anti-money laundering head at Visa for 5 years. Before that, he worked at the Federal Reserve for 15 years. We have another person on our team from the Federal Reserve. We also have Arthur Levitt. We have our European compliance officer was a former PricewaterhouseCoopers attorney, actually. So everything we do is all about compliance, rules, and regulations. So when we enter new countries, we work very closely with those regulators to make sure they understand how we work. Because obviously, you know, Bitcoin has that perception. And then once they meet with our team and understand how we onboard new merchants, how we file KYC and AML policies. So for example, any new merchant or partner we sign up with has to go through a rigorous KYC and anti-money laundering policy. We don't do any high-risk verticals, even though a lot of those verticals are legal, actually. We still don't have to do high-risk verticals. So we make sure that everything is formed to our compliance policies and work with the regulators to understand that. We oftentimes get subpoenaed by the governments for some of our merchant activity, and we comply with the government to make sure all the information's given to them in a unique fashion time, actually. So everything we do is very compliance focused, rules and regulations for each country. We err on the side of caution, being so high profile in the Bitcoin industry, our company, with all the investors we have to make sure that every I is dotted, every T is crossed, per se. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much.